And welcome everybody. Most importantly, welcome back to the channel and to each a good day. Well, you see a selection of parts here, and I want to apologize for a couple things. One, it has been a little while since we posted a video. Unfortunately, things happen. Put a little bit of a delay on things, but we're back on things today. I'll explain a little bit more about that here towards the end of the video. You'll also have to forgive me that in the background here we've got lawns being taken care of. We got new roofs going on neighbors' houses, so we got a little bit of background noise, but I'll do my best to kind of talk over that. But as you can see, we're back on our 2012 red Ram today, otherwise known as Candy Apple. And what we're doing today is a couple services. One is going to be the oil. We're going to service that again. If you remember, right after the rebuild, we did the first oil change at about 270 miles. In which, in that case, we went from the 5W20 break-in oil to a 0W40 AMS oil signature series. And we made that change for a couple of reasons. One, because remember, we deleted the MDS off this system completely. So it doesn't necessarily look at the weight of oil for MDS actuation because it's no longer there. Plus, it allows us for all of our Hemi engines, so this 2012 1500, this 2016 2500, and our Hellcat, which is resting comfortably in the garage, all now use the same weight of oil. So yes, even the 2016 2500 from the factory and the Hellcat from the factory use a 0W40. Now, interesting enough, even though this truck had MDS, which we've since deleted, but even when it had MDS, it also used 0W40. So it kind of gets all of our Hemi engines, which are all supercharged at this point, onto the same weight of oil, making it a bit more convenient. Also, remember, if you try to up the weight of oil in a Hemi like a 1500 that does not have the MDS deleted, you're probably going to throw a check engine light and a code, because it will be able to determine the viscosity of the oil is changed based on pressure and temperature. But in our case, again, we have the MDS system removed and disabled at this point, so we don't get that particular code because it's not performing that check. Either way, I'm rambling too much here. So what you see here is we're going to be doing a engine oil change at another interval. Now we are at about 542 miles on this build right now. So we've gone another 270 miles and we're going to do another oil change. Now, just like the last time, we've got our Blackstone kit here, which, as you can see, what comes with the kit is a shipping bottle, the bottle to collect the sample in, and we got a piece of oil absorbent mat and a plastic baggie, which will be used to house this sample, and then all of this will then get pushed inside the shipping bottle. And they give you a little decal to put on your window as kind of an oil change reminder sticker. So we'll be taking an oil sample from the engine. We'll also be taking an oil sample using a second kit from the supercharger, just like we did last time, and sending those in for analysis. Now, when we get the analysis back from this second round of testing, we'll do another video and we'll come back and show you what those look like. But just a little bit of a preview with that, they did see some wear metals in the oil. Now, some of that is due to the engine break-in. They were a little bit higher than what we'd have liked to have seen, meaning we could potentially be having a slight bearing issue with our build. But what Blackstone Labs wanted us to do is to do another short interval, aka 270 miles the first time, 270 miles this time, do another sample, send it to them, and what we're going to be looking for is those wear metals to decrease now that we're further into the break-in period. Now, if they stay the same or obviously get higher, then we definitely know that we've got an issue that we may potentially need to address. Hopefully not, but again, we'll send this off to the lab and let the lab tell us. Now, you see over here, we've got a new transmission pan. I spoke about this when we were doing the rebuild on the 2012, when we were doing the engine rebuild and everything else we've done to it since we got it from the auction. And I made a comment that we had this we were just not ready to quite put it on, because you remember we did in a previous video in the build series, we went ahead and did the transmission service in which we put fresh fluid and fresh filters in it, but we held off putting on the replacement pan because we wanted to make sure the transmission was functioning and shifting okay after that initial service, because the fluid that came out of there looked like it had never been changed. According to the dates that were stamped on the filters that we took out, it had, I think, the original 2012 dated filters in it, because it doesn't look like, so it basically, it didn't look like it ever had a fluid or a filter service on it. So we wanted to make sure the transmission was going to be okay with that fluid change. It seems to be, like I said, it's been 542 miles since all that's been done, and it seems to be shifting just fine. So we're going to go ahead and put the new pan on it today and go ahead and get our new set of filters in it and our new set of fresh transmission fluid, except this time we're going to also switch over to the AMS Oil Signature Series multi-vehicle transmission fluid. Now, the reason why we want Signature Series on this one as well rather than the standard multi-vehicle is the standard multi-vehicle, per the website, does meet the Chrysler ATF +4 spec, but only down to, I think it's like -30 Fahrenheit. Any colder than that, even the AMS Oil website says the standard OE multi-vehicle oil only protects down to -30. Now, in most cases, that protection is fine. However, the other reason why we want to the Signature versus the OE is that on the bottle itself and the website, and hopefully you can see this, you can see all these specs that this Signature Series meets. And let me see if I can get you in closer to see this. You'll see Chrysler here and ATF +4 listed here. So in the Signature Series, they list all of these specs, but more importantly, the spec we're looking for is Chrysler ATF 4, again, on this Signature Series oil. So that's why we've chosen to go with that particular make of their multi-vehicle ATF fluid. And we got a couple big gallons of, we got 2.5 gallon jugs of this. It's going to be more than what we need, but we wanted extra just so that we could do the initial service here and have some stuff extra in case we needed it. Now, along with putting this pan in, because it has the provision for it, and we'll get to it when we do the pan install, we're going to go ahead and install the first 2 temperature sensors. Remember, we're going to have a temperature sensor in the transmission pan for this 2012, and we're also going to put a temperature sensor in the rear differential cover when we change it. So we're going to go ahead and put this 1/8 NPT temperature sensor, and we're going to get this plugged into our Banks iDash and get it configured. Now, the other thing we're doing here is, on this channel, if you watched me do this before, you know that I stick usually exclusively to Wix XP filters. I like the Wix brand. It's a nice high quality filter for a decent price. Now, when I was on the AMS Oil website ordering the oil and transmission fluid for this service, I also noticed that they listed a filter for this application, which is what you see right here, which is what they call their EAO 11. Now you can see the filter boxes are the same height. Now, the AMS Oil, this is an extended, what they call an extended protection or extended service interval filter. And you'd see they say in 99% efficiency at 20 microns with some caveats, and of course up to 25,000 mile or 1 year service interval, also with some caveats on that as well. Now, the Wix XP filter, if we look at the back here, and you probably won't be able to see it, so I'll read it to you, but they have a recommended, let's see, it says to oil and filter change intervals in accordance with vehicle oil life monitor and owner's manual. Recommendation, typically looks like 3750 miles to 10,000 miles, not to exceed 12 months. Now, Wix XP also states that their filter is good for the extreme driving, idling for long periods of time, and harsh driving conditions. So what I figured we would do is give one of AMS Oil's premium filters a shot here. And what we could potentially do is when we go do the next oil change interval after this one, we can then cut this filter apart, kind of look at the insides of it, see if it trapped anything, things of that nature. I don't want to cut a new filter apart to look at the insides, at least not yet, because I will tell you that this one is a scooch more expensive than the wicks. Even on their own site, they sell the wicks cheaper than they do their product. Now, I got a little scale here. I thought this might be fun to do. Now, you might be able to see this too well because of the sun, but I'll let you know. Just got a little, now, obviously accuracy of the scale is subject to be there, but we're going to zero this out. I'm going to measure this. And welcome back. Sorry about that. Camera battery is bad. It went from 97% to 3. But either way, got you plugged into external pack. So one last item I wanted to cover here and thought it would be kind of cool just to see it. And yeah, granted, the accuracy of the scale could leave something to be desired, but I'm going to give you this in grams just for those that may be curious. Now I'll tell you what the number is in case it's hard for you to see, but this is the new Wix XP extended protection filter. There's a number there for you, the 57899 XP. So empty, fresh out of the box, 395 grams. And then we've got the AMS oil, again, fresh filter. It does feel heavier. And you can also see empty as well. And if we do a weight on this one, see 433 grams. So 433 grams empty for the AMS oil filter on its weight versus, again, 394. So 394 to 433. So, you know, a little bit heavier of a filter, and it feels a little bit heavier, but you know, that could just be thicker materials using the casing. It could be as far as the metal and stuff, or it could be a little bit more filter material inside the casing itself. Now, like I said, once we're done with this filter, I'll happily cut it open, and then we'll take a look at the insides of it and then compare it to a Wix filter at that point. But we're going to go back in with the AMS oil filter and give their extended filter a shot on this one and kind of see how it goes. So again, pardon for the really weird jump cut there. Had a battery failure within the camera, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and get everything set up, and then we'll start emptying some oil out of the truck and getting things ready. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. Once again, apologies for the background noise. I will try to speak over it. So we've got our oil cap pulled, and just generally this is what I like to do with them, is put them right here on the hood latch. Again, just as a reminder that we're getting ready to drain the oil, and or the oil has been drained, and that way hopefully will prevent somebody else, if someone comes in behind me, keep them from closing the hood and trying to start the vehicle. Also got our dipstick pulled and laying up here as a reminder as well. But this should also, again, like I said, keep you from closing it and just give you that reminder to make sure that you check and make sure you've added oil back in before you proceed further. But again, dipstick pulled, oil cap out to give us some ventilation. And then what we'll do is we'll go underneath now and prep to take our oil sample and then start draining our oil out. So let me get you resituated underneath and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Let me straighten up the shot for you. I've got you zoomed in on the valve that everybody kind of loves to hate, kind of love-hate relationship for a lot of individuals. And if I pronounce this wrong, I apologize. It's either from Moto or from Motive valve, and you've probably seen other individuals use these type of valves before. Let me move you in a bit closer as well. And if you've seen the previous videos, you know that we run one on this 1500. We also run the same valve in our 2500 as well. And we do have some Hellcat content coming up, in which I will be installing not one but two of these valves into that Hellcat. I'm just waiting for the parts to arrive, because the Hellcat, if you don't already know, give a little trivia for you, has two. It has obviously one that'll go in the oil pan,
but it also has a drain plug, which we will also replace with one of these valves in the oil cooler of that vehicle. So move one of our shop lights out of the way. And like I said, I've been running one on our 2500 now for years, and it's been fine. Hasn't really given us an issue. And again, this one here is also not giving us any issues as well. Now you can get different styles of these. You can get one that come with like a shorter nipple or a longer nipple to help with draining. I find that these, at least on the truck, seem to work just fine. And what they are is that you can see that there's like a little kind of locking tab type plastic piece here. And I'm sorry, let me get the light out of your face. See if I can reach around this flashlight, not blind you again. We can just pull that little locking tab off. You can see where it's got the groove for the lever in it. Kind of place that off to the side. Now this lever is spring loaded, so we actually have to push it down and over to get this valve to open, and that's what keeps this valve closed. Now I haven't had any problems with obviously road debris hitting that valve and opening them up, nor have I had an issue with any type of debris coming up and hitting this valve and snapping it off completely. Like I said, it's been fine. Now if you're in an area where you do a lot of, I don't want to say rocky environments, but maybe rocky environments, rough riding environments, off-roading, things of that nature, and you put one of these valves in, you might just want to be, mindful of kind of what you're driving over. But we got our sample bottle, so what I'm going to do is crack this valve open, let it run for a few seconds, and then we'll grab our sample. So again, if we push down on our valve and then over, you can see we got a nice flow of goodness. 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll take our sample. And there we go. We'll get a little bit more in there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna pause you. I'm gonna let this continue to drain, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Let me get you some light so we can see things a little bit better here. There we go. You'll have to forgive the little bit of washout at the bottom of the camera. That's the sun hitting the concrete in the front of the truck. But either way, you can see that we're down to a very, very, very slow drip here. So we're just going to take our little lever on our valve, pull it forward again. You can hear it kind of click in place, and wipe off on the residual amount of our oil. A little drip there. There we go. And then last, we'll take our little locking tab that you saw us remove earlier, and we'll see about getting this reinstalled. There we go. So awesome. So like I say, it does take longer just because of the diameter of that opening to drain the oil out than it would if you just had a standard drain plug in there. But like I said, at least for me, for the convenience of not having to take a drain plug in and out all the time, and things of that nature, it's kind of worth it. I shouldn't say kinda, but at least for me it is worth it. So let's do this. Now, while that oil was draining out, I didn't see any glitter in it. It looks nice and clean, which is a good thing, but just because we can't see it doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have a problem. That's what the oil analysis at the lab is going to tell us, because once again, we had some wear metals in the first sample on the first oil change after the rebuild, but some of that would be normal because the engine's going through break-in. But if we continue to see abnormal amounts of wear metal in the oil from this point forward, then it could indicate that we're having failure of some kind, probably from a bearing, something of that nature. But like I said, we'll send the samples off when they come back, and then we'll kind of look at those reports. So now that that's done, what we're going to do forward, what we're going to do next is go forward. We're going to drain the oil out of the supercharger, because remember, we are supercharged here. The supercharger is a self-contained oiling system. It does not use engine oil. It uses its own oil. and that oil gets changed every time the engine oil gets changed. That way they stay on the same interval. So I'm gonna pause you real quick and I'll bring you right back. One moment. So I figured I'd show you a shot of this outside the truck in a little bit more natural light, but zoomed in still. So you can see the oil that we do have is nice and clean and clear. It doesn't look glittery, so at least there's no large chunks of metal coming out with the oil, which is good, Like I said, a little bit of wear is good, a lot of bit of wear is bad, but we'll know more about kind of what our engine oil looks like once the lab gets back to us. So let me get you slid underneath and bring you back, and then we'll get that supercharger drained. One moment. And welcome back. Hopefully you can see that okay, that it's in focus. It's hard for me to see because I got you on a tripod kind of tucked in the front bumper here to get a shot on this, but you can see our drain line here for a supercharger. Now, just a note on this is that at least with this particular ProCharger kit, this line is extra. This is what they call the remote oil drain slash fill kit. I'm not exactly sure the terminology on it, but basically it's like it's a remote drain kit, for lack of another way of saying it. And I'll bring you up at the top, and if you watch this series, you know why we got this. Is it makes the draining of the head unit for that supercharger a lot easier to deal with, because the normal drain line is right underneath, right on the bottom of the head, and kind of where a lot of these superchargers end up setting, just because the need for space. It makes getting to that lower drain plug kind of difficult if you don't have this optional kit. And what this is, you can see it's just a braided stainless steel line that threads into the bottom where the old drain plug's at, and just gives you a nice length of hose that you can then kind of tag it anywhere you want. And on this particular case here, you can see we just got it zip tied to the front fender. So I'm going to crack this loose and get this drained, and just like we did with the engine oil, we're going to get our sample bottle, and we're going to grab a sample of this, and we're also going to send this into the lab, just like we're going to do the engine oil. We did this last time as well, because the head unit is also going through a break-in period, just like the motor is, with the head unit being a newer unit. Now, if you get one of these supercharger units, if you happen to pick up a used unit, then obviously yours is probably going through break-in, but it's still kind of a good idea to send off samples to a lab periodically, just so we can monitor the health of the internals of that supercharger, just like we're going to monitor the health of the internals of the engine. So with that being said, I'm not going to bore you by showing you filling another bottle, but we're going to get this crack loose, we're going to fill it, drain it, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, hopefully the image is still okay. I guess I'll find out when I get this on a bigger screen, but we had a bit of a casualty. The tripod got hit, camera tilted forward, hit the concrete, and broke the little protective glass that's actually on top of the lens. But thanks to Power Stroke, Rainman Ray, and A-Rod's pocket screwdriver, we're able to dig out the rest of the glass fragments. On these GoPros, it looks like that little piece of glass in front of the actual camera lens is just held inside with some double-sided sticky tape. So I was able to get that stuff out, and the image no longer, because unfortunately when the glass cracked, it cracked like right in through here. You can see a line. So hopefully it still focuses and looks okay. It looks okay through the viewfinder. I'm not sure if that's just a plain piece of glass or if it's some kind of polarizer. I guess I'll find out when I go to edit this. Hopefully it's not terrible, but I will look at getting some new glass for this if it's possible, since it seems to be just double-sided stickied in place, or see if I could possibly get some new GoPros. I'm still using Hero Black 7s, if that gives you an idea, and I got them 2 years ago. One finally died earlier this year, and now this one's front glass and rear glass has been broken, unfortunately, due to being knocked over a lot. So like I said, they have taken a lot of abuse, and hopefully will still go, but that's enough rambling. If you're familiar with these 1500s, you'll know that the oil filter location is not in the greatest spot. I'll get you underneath here and show you. But if you got to form a funnel, that helps with the mess.
or if you just got a gallon, one of these gallon by name brand, if you want to call it that, Ziploc type bags. What I found you can do, and I've seen others do this, is just crack it loose, and I'll put a link in the description to where I got this. This is a JM3 Oil Filter Wrench. He custom makes these, he custom powder coats them. He can make them for pretty much any size you need. If he doesn't have one that's in a standard size, then you just email him with what you're looking for. And again, this is not a promotion. I wasn't given these. I did pay for these, but I do like them, and I like to plug them where I can. But we'll get them cracked loose with this oil filter wrench, and then once it's loose, we can slip our Ziploc bag over the filter, finish unscrewing, and at least hope catch, if not all, but at least most of the oil that'll drain out of that, because on these 1500s it will drain a fair bit when you crack that filter loose. But to kind of show you where it's at, in case you're curious and haven't seen me do this before, and let me put the battery pack down so I can kind of get a shop light in here and show you what I'm talking about. And I understand this is a lot of rambling. I do apologize, but I like to show the details in case there's someone out there who wants to see it. And right here you can see our oil filter. You can see me touching it, and hopefully you can kind of see what's below it. It's on the other side of the frame here. Cross member of the frame is the steering column and such that goes to the passenger side wheel. So unfortunately, just due to where they put that, when you crack that loose, it starts dripping all the oil onto the boot for the tie rod that goes to the passenger side. So that's why I try to get up there at least with like a plastic bag or a Forma funnel if you have. Just try to keep oil from dripping on this rear boot, and this bushing on this passenger side, because the longer they get oil soaked and the more they get oil soaked, especially with that rubber bushing, it tends to deteriorate the rubber bushings. But either way, I'm going to get that oil filter crack loose, try to minimize the mess, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. I'm not sure, hopefully you can see this in the shot, but we've got it cracked loose. I've got the bag wrapped around the oil filter, and now I'm just going to reach in here and kind of grab the bag and the filter at the same time and turn it. Now I may not be able to show this to you because I kind of need both my hands. Right now I'm holding you up in here, but just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, just looking to kind of hold the bag in place. Now that we got it cracked loose enough, we can spin it by hand. Just again, just trying to use the bag to minimize the mess, but hopefully that kind of gives you a better idea of what that looks like. I'm sorry, it's hard to show you this and get up in here, and because I need both my hands, and there isn't really a good place to put the tripod. So let me get this spun off here and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. It's not perfect, but this is kind of what we end up with. You can see that we can drop the filter in the bag along with the oil that spills. Now it doesn't get all of it because there will be some drips that just come off of, you know, what's left on the oil filter mount on the block of the engine, but it's a far cry better than what it is if you just kind of crack it loose and let it drain. But even if you crack it loose and let it drain, you know, a little bit of brake clean, just kind of douse the area around the around that where it drips off onto the frame and stuff. A little bit of brake clean and it'll clean it right up. But I'm gonna let that drip a little bit into our pan, and then I'll come back and we'll prep the new filter for install for once. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, the next item I'm going to cover is it causes a bit of a controversy, and I'm not looking to start a comment war down below about whether you should or you shouldn't do it, and that is pre-filling your oil filters. Now, if you've watched this channel in the past, I typically have not done this, with the exception of I did do it on the first startup right after the engine rebuild. But I'm going to start doing it going forward, and that is pre-filling the oil filters. And the reason why I say that is, and I'll put a link in the description below, and as well as the right hand corner of your screen, it should pop up here any moment, and that's going to be to a channel, and I believe the channel name is the Motor Oil Geek. If I have that incorrect, I do apologize. But you will see in one of his videos, what he does is he's an oil engineer, a formulator. He used to work for Joe Gibbs Racing, and he would engineer their racing oil formulas. And one of the things they did recently was they took an engine and a dyno, and they did pre-filled oil filters and pre-filled oil filters and non-pre-filled oil filters. Did fresh oil, fresh filters, the whole gambit, ran the period for an inch at a time after each test, took samples, sent them off to the lab, and definitively showed where, when you didn't pre-fill your oil filter, not only did it take longer to build oil pressure, but it showed a substantial amount more of wear metals in the oil sample when the oil filter was not pre-filled versus filled. So again, I'm not trying to tell you whether you should do it or you shouldn't do it. I'm just explaining the reason why I'm going to start doing it going forward in my setups. Again, just due to that lab testing, because numbers can lie, but in this case, lab testing does not lie. As well as, if we look at this AMS oil filter, you'll see a couple of icons here. This one showing you to pre-fill the filter. This one showing you to lubricate the gasket on the outside of it, and the final two here, basically this one meaning that when the filter makes contact with the flange on the block, then turn the filter another 3/4 of a turn and then stop. So again, they're just trying to let you know that pre-fill the filter, lubricate the gasket, and only 3/4 tight. No need to go, you know, full ugga-duggas on this. What I like to do is when that gasket reaches that flange, in other words, the gasket makes contact, is I like to take a Sharpie, a silver Sharpie, and make a mark right where that happens. And then I can color this area silver and then use that mark as a gauge as I rotate this 3/4 of a turn, so I know when to stop. So I know when I'm close to that 3/4 of a turn interval. The other thing about the AMS oil filter that I'm noticing here is that this is all textured. This whole outside is textured versus the wicks, which is not, which makes this really, really nice. When you go to get this off, having this texture on here gives you that extra grip that you should be able to even break this loose without having to put an oil filter wrench on it. So that's a nice touch. So again, I'm going to get this pre-filtered, get this lubed up, clean up our mating surface, and get this filter installed. And I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our oil filter installed, and just like on our oil filter down there, we did write the current date and mileage on that filter as a reminder to us the last time that we've done this, in case, you know, we either don't use the window sticker or lose the window sticker, whatever the case may be. It's just a kind of convenient reminder of when it's been done. Now on this ProCharger head unit, this D1SC, it takes a 6-ounce bottle of oil per change. You can get this in 3 packs directly from ProCharger, but you only get one of this particular top that you see here. So make sure that you save this for use on the other 2 bottles. So the other 2 bottles will just come with a standard cap like you see here. So we just removed the dipstick, and we did remove the dipstick prior to draining to allow it to vent, but I'm going to refill it through the dipstick port on this one. And in case you haven't seen one of these, they do give you a method to check the level of oil. It's kind of hard to see because this is black in color, but there are markings on here for minimum and full. It's actually on that side right there. You may not be able to see it. Max is up here and min's down towards the bottom. What makes it hard is because this is black in color, and their oil is kind of a greenish shade. You can see there. If at all possible, only piece of feedback I would say to ProCharger, if it's possible to make this a lighter color, just so it's easier to see the oil on it. I don't know, again, just a preference thing. So we'll get this filled up, we'll get oil filled up in our engine. Again, it's a Hemi engine on a 5.7 with a filter, so we're going to need 7 quarts of oil. We put about a half a quart in the filter when we filled it, so we should need another 6.5, and then we'll double check. Then when I bring you back, after we get everything filled, we'll crack open the catch can that you see back there and just see if we have anything. I doubt we will, because we haven't been driving it too terribly hard, and it's only been, like I said, 542 miles if I remember correctly since the rebuild, so there shouldn't be any much in there, probably just very little, but we'll check it regardless since we're here doing the maintenance. But let's get our oil put in, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So real quick, we've got the supercharger filled up. We're working on getting our engine oil in now. We're just cracking open our second jug until we get to our needed 7 quarts. But I just want to, I've seen this pointed out several times, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, so to speak, but I just wanted to point it out myself. If you got jugs like this one that are sealed with this foil type paper, which tends to come off in pieces, just make sure that you've got it all off before you go to pour it in. I know what you're thinking, you know, sometimes you could just poke a hole in it and go straight to pouring it, but, and I've seen it happen, you don't want one of these little fragments of foil here to end up in the engine, because it can work its way down into the crankcase, and worst case scenario, you know, start to partially or completely clog up your pickup tube, you know, and make for a very bad day. So I just want to point that out real quick. Again, we're just getting the last of our engine oil in, and then I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're about 6.5 quarts in. That includes what we dumped into the filter. So just to show you where we're sitting at currently, pre-start. It's going to be hard for you to see, but if that's max, oil level is right about here, about a couple hash marks away from max. Now that will drop down obviously as we start it, and then we'll just run for a few moments, power it down, and then we'll finish topping off what's needed at that point. All right, so perfect. So in case you're curious, I'll show you that part number of that funnel. I think I just got this one at the parts store. Flow Tool 10709. It fits the filler neck of these 5.7s pretty well. Grips in quite nicely, and you know, prevents, keeps it from falling over and such when it fills up. It actually works out to be a very nice funnel. Again, at least for these 5.7 fill necks, it works out quite nice. So what I'm going to do prior to starting this, since we know we're going to do the transmission pan, I'm going to prep next to get everything in place to do that pan swap, so that way we can go ahead and fill the fluid, start it up for a little bit. Once we're done with all that, let it run, and then we'll top all our fluids off at that point. But I did promise you that we would see if we can pull the catch can and figure out if we've got anything in here from, again, just a couple 100 miles, 540 miles worth of stuff. Oh yeah, look at that. We can see it. We got a pretty good amount in there. Again, it's only 540 miles worth of accumulation in that catch can, but let's see. So, I don't know, maybe about 2 tablespoons worth of oil that catch can has kept from going into that intake. And it's going to be probably a little bit more prevalent in this engine because, again, we're running a boosted application versus non, but awesome. So seems to be working quite well. So let me get this cleaned out and get it threaded back on, and then when I bring it back, we'll prep to start dropping that transmission pan. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got you positioned back underneath the truck. You can see we've got our big concrete mixing tub. You've seen me use these before, especially for jobs like this. And it's one of the reasons why we're changing that pan out, is to have a pan with a proper drain plug. And unfortunately, if you're familiar with doing this job, this manufacturer, as well as several others, they just don't include a drain plug in the transmission pan for whatever reason. But these big concrete mixing tubs like the one you see here work perfect for these type of jobs, because you can see they're big enough, they overlap the area needed, and they do a really nice job of when you start getting this thing cracked loose and the liquid transmission fluid starts to drain out and drips and
and steadily runs, and eventually once the pan unseats enough, it kind of deluges out. But that, again, the width and length of these mixing tubs does a really great job of kind of catching all that. And you can get these at your local home improvement. I picked this one up, I got 2 of these and a smaller one that I picked up at Lowe's quite a few years ago. Now on this particular transmission, in case you're curious, it's 8mm bolts around the perimeter, and the new transmission pan, and I'll show you all that here when we get to putting the pan back on, comes with all new hardware. But what I will do is just loosen up the bolts in the back of the transmission that you can kind of see right there on the back of the pan. We'll loosen those up, but leaving them in there as we take out the remainder. That way that'll kind of act like a hinge point, much like when you do on a differential, where you leave some of the bolts on top loose but threaded in, so that way the pan just doesn't completely drop. Now, if you remember when we did the service work on this, when we changed the fluid and filters, we put a gasket on here, and I think it was a Fram gasket or Mall gasket, one of the two, but we use a gasket in lieu of RTV. I like to use gaskets where I can instead of RTV, and so far the gasket's held up fine, and there's like I said, no signs of leaks or anything. So it shouldn't be too terribly hard to get that pan to crack loose. I'm not going to film it because it's just going to be me taking out a bunch of bolts until we can get the pan to drop and then fall. But and I'll cover this a bit more when we put the pan up, but you'll notice the exhaust crosses right over. However, you can still get the pan and the filters and everything off and changed without having to drop that cross exhaust. And due to the cross exhaust, it requires us to use the pan that we have just so it'll clearance it. Now, if you have the type of truck with this transmission where you don't have the exhaust that crosses over the pan, you can actually get a pan that's the same depth all the way across, and it gives you just that much more fluid capacity. The pan we're going to put on is deeper on this end here where you see me pointing, and maintains the same kind of shallowness on the far end, but it is about 1.5 quarts deeper than the factory pan, again just giving you a little bit of extra fluid. And of course the pan, if you can use it, that goes all the way across, is just even, I think it's probably about 3 or so quarts additional capacity. But either way, I'm going to take out a bunch of 8mm bolts and start this pan draining, and then I'll bring it back. And yes, you do see me wearing gloves for this part of it, just because of the mess this tends to create when you crack these loose. Plus, if you've ever smelt it, I swear that ATF4, which is what Chrysler uses, smells worse than gear oil. I would rather smell gear oil than ATF4. It's a very, very distinct smell, at least in my opinion. Either way, let me start getting these crack loose, and I'll bring it back. One moment. As if I can get the camera to shut off or stop. And hopefully you can see that there. You can see that even with just the ones on the passenger side and the front bolts broke loose and the back one's loose but in place, we're already starting to drain. So that's, again, it's a little bit better than, in my opinion, silicone, because it's easier to crack the pan loose, but a little bit worse than silicone, if that makes sense, because it is easy and the pan doesn't really stick and it's easy to crack loose. At least with silicone you might have a little bit of drip, but you've got some time to play with it before you crack the silicone loose and it all just starts to drain. Either way, you can see that we are draining. I got to get to the driver's side and finish taking the bolts out of that side of it, but we'll continue to crack on this and I'll bring it back. One moment. But again, you can see how well these mixing pans work for items like this. And yes, like I said, it's messy with no drain plan. You can see it gets all over the transmission cross member and the exhaust that goes across, but you know, no harm, no foul. We'll get that all cleaned up with brake clean when we get the new pan put in. But let me get to the driver's side and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our pan out, bulk of our fluids drained into our tub. And yes, as I was removing the bolts, since the new pan is going to come with replacement bolts, I just let the old bolts fall into the pan. Even if I was going to reuse the transmission pan and its hardware, I would probably just let them fall below into the tub anyway. And I shouldn't say probably, I have done that. It's easy enough to fish them out later when you're ready to reinstall everything versus, you know, fighting with making sure that you keep this in place to catch all your drips and then trying to, you know, pull your bolts out individually to take them out. It's easier, again, at least in my opinion, it's just easier to loosen them, let them fall into the big tray and just fish them out later. So as you can see, if you haven't seen one of these before or any previous videos of anyone else doing this, at least on these particular transmissions, you can see we got a spin-on filter here and we got the larger filter here. Now this filter, the larger filter, is secured in the back, just to show you that with a, let's see if I can get you in there to see that. Can you see my finger? Right on the back of this filter, there's a T25 Torx bit right there. I'm trying to be mindful of the camera lens because remember it no longer has this protective glass on it. But that's a T25 Torx bit. We'll get that off and we'll get that filter out. Now I'll show you there's a seal that this filter goes into that's inside the valve body of the transmission. And actually not valve body but pump body, sorry, that makes sure that this seals and doesn't pull in air when the pump pulls in fluid through this filter. Now the book states you can reuse that seal provided it's in good condition and not torn and, you know, isn't brittle, so on and so forth. Now when we did the service on this and we put the fluid in it and changed out these two filters initially about 540 miles ago, we put a new seal in there. So when we get this filter out, I'm going to take a look at it, and if it looks good, then we're just going to reuse the seal and not bother pulling it out. But I'll show you the part number of what that seal is. Now be mindful, sometimes when you get the kits, they'll come with this filter, they may or may not come with this spin-on filter. And when you get this filter, sometimes they come with the seal for that pump body and sometimes they don't. So just be mindful that when you order it, if you're looking for a complete kit, make sure the kit, you know, includes that seal. But what I'm going to do first, and again, I'm going to show you in one of these, I sent the part number of this filter to JM3 about a year or so ago, a couple years ago, and he let me know the size of it and the size of the oil filter wrench on his website to be able to fit this. So we've got an oil filter wrench that actually fits, as you can see, this transmission spin-on filter, which makes it loads easier to remove. Now I have, if you have to, I have gotten on here with just a decent clean shop towel and been able to get enough grip to get this to spin. But just remember, this is obviously submerged in oil, so this will be really slippery if you're trying to remove this by hand. But again, usually a shop towel will kind of get it. So I'm going to take out the Torx bit in the back of that, get this filter out, and then get this spin-on filter out, and then I'll bring you back. And this is no different than an oil filter. It spins off the same way as an oil filter, spins on the same way as an oil filter. And I'll show you the part number on this when we go over it. This is the instructions. Mopar gives you a foot-pound torque value for this filter if you buy a Mopar one, and they also give you the same adage as an oil filter, where you just spin this on. Once a gasket makes contact, you do 3/4, no more than that, and you're good to go. So let me get these filters out of here and I'll bring you back one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our two filters removed, and we just got some residual kind of dripping on the lines and such where that spin-on filter goes. But what I'm going to do now, this seal, if you remember, we talked about it earlier. We put this pump body seal in when we did the filters, and it's not much age on it, but since I have a new filter, a new seal, I'm gonna go ahead and remove that one and put a new seal in. That way that's new and all the filters are new. But again, just to let you know, the book does say as long as that seal's in good shape, you don't have to remove it. It can be reused. But I wanted to show you kind of how I've gotten these out in the past is just be careful that you don't scratch anything in here when you do this, and you definitely don't want to, you know, scratch this surface in here where the seal sets, because you don't want it to suck air and aerate the transmission fluid. Now usually what I do is get a really small like pocket screwdriver and just kind of tap it with a hammer, get this seal to start to fold inward on itself, and then normally once you get it to fold in enough, you can get that seal to then just kind of fall out. And for putting the new seal in, I found that, and I'll show you what I use, that on this particular seal, an 18mm 1/2" socket with a stubby extension, and you just kind of put it up in there and just gently tap at it, and normally you can get that new seal to drive in place with no issue. But let me go get the parts, and we'll kind of review what we're doing here, and I'll bring you back. One moment.
And welcome back. So I got you out just so we kind of review what we got here. Now again, there's the new transmission pan. This is from Mag-Hytec. And what comes in the kit is, just pan you back down here and get you straightened out. You get a bag of replacement hardware, so they'll give you Allen screws to go back in place of the factory pan bolts. They do give you, at least for this filter, the appropriate, this is the 4x4 filter. You need to use the 4x4 filter with this newer pan because it's deeper, even though you may have a 2-wheel drive version. If you don't use the proper size filter, this won't set down low enough to properly pull fluid up like it's supposed to. But you get the pan, you get this filter, you get the bag of hardware, and you get a new gasket itself for the pan. And you'll see here that they state to you that this is a fiber gasket, not a cork gasket. And they use fiber gaskets because they found that it provides a better seal when going to aluminum, because this pan being aluminum and the transmission housing or case also being aluminum. And of course you get a set of instructions here. Now, what I wanted to point out with this seal I was talking about earlier, there's the part number. This is actually a Mopar seal. Now this is the one for the pump body that serves the seal for the pickup tube for the main filter. And again, this does not come with this kit. But again, so you may want to pick one of these up separately if you're going to do this job, or the appropriate one. This one, if I recall correctly, I think services 2011 to 2018. Again, for this particular vintage and transmission. But if it's good and you elect to reuse it, then obviously you don't need it, but you may want to pick up one of those pump body seals just in case. Because again, it does not come with this particular kit. So again, we got our instructions here, which they do give us some torque specs. So these Allen bolts, when we get them in, they want torqued between 7 and 9 foot-pounds or 105 inch-pounds. You can see that there. And then of course they give you the specs on the transmissions that this particular pan is due to fit, and they do make them for Chevy, Dodge, and Ford, and quite a few applications, makes and models. And of course they give you the instructions here, making sure that everything's flat. Say remove the filter, and you can see the note here, remove the filter and replace it with a stock 4-wheel drive Dodge filter. And of course they give you the appropriate part numbers. And I'll show you the smaller round filter. This is the round filter that also does not come with this kit. ECU transmission, the drill ring, check drain plugs, making sure that everything's tight. And there's the note here about this particular pan. This looks to be about 1.5 quarts more than stock. Awesome. Okay, so the rest are just install notes. I won't bore you by reading each and every one of those. And of course, then again, you can see they're really trying to emphasize that you use the correct filter with this pan. As you can see here, it'll cause fitment issues and multitude of other issues. Okay, now for the spin-on filter, I'll show you that part number. There you go. And again, verify these part numbers. Make sure they're appropriate for your particular application. And this is, as you can see, an actual Mopar spin-on filter. And you can see they've got their torque specs. So they say 7 foot-pounds or 3/4 a turn after the gasket makes contact for this round filter. And yes, it is packaged in a kind of an armor rust prohibitive paper. That's because this filter is all metal, and besides, if you saw it inside the pan, it's normally submerged within transmission fluid. So since that's metal, they're just guarding it against accumulating rust. So we'll get that installed. Now, what I was showing you earlier, this particular seal, you can see the lip there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our socket, and we're going to socket against the metal part of this lip. And there's our 18mm socket with just a 1/2" 18mm socket with stubby extension. You don't have to use the 1/2" one. I just found it works quite well, at least the diameter of this socket. And you can see there that that socket does a pretty good job of lining up all around, supporting the lip of this. So usually I'll just kind of get them in place, tap very gently on the end of our extension here, and normally we can get this to seat. And what we're wanting to do is to make sure that this metal lip right here is seated all around that pump body. So in other words, we want it flat. We don't want it sitting kind of, at any kind of an angle or side, or we want this flush. Like I said, in order to get the old one out, I'm just going to catch that seal with a little screwdriver here, and just kind of tap away at it gently, get that seal to fold in half and then fall out. Like I said, trying to get you underneath that and get everything set up to see that is rather difficult, because I'm not up on jack stands. I'm just using the fact that this truck has 20-inch tires on it to get it high enough off the ground to work. But I will show you what that seal looks like once we get the old one out. So let me concentrate on that, and I'll bring you back. And this fastener right here for the main filter, that Torx one that was in the back, if I recall correctly, let me look at my torque wrench. I did pick up one of these. This is the gear wrench, a 1/4 inch torque wrench. This is in inch-pounds, and I got this one, let's see, it says 30 to 200 inch-pound torque wrench. I got this one because I saw Rainman Ray using his a lot, and he seems to have liked it. So I went ahead and picked one up. But that fastener on the back is, in our application, that fastener for that main filter on the back is 40 inch-pounds. So we'll get this torqued appropriately when we get that main filter reinstalled. But for now, let me get that old seal out. I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll get the new seal in. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can kind of see what we did there. This is the old pump body seal, and you can see we just kind of, again, using a really small screwdriver with just some light taps, kind of got up underneath the edge of the seal first, and then was able to drive it and get it to fold in, as you see. And you just, once you get enough tension off of it, you usually can just pull them right out, or they'll kind of just maybe even fall out on their own. So again, I'm going to use the old 18mm socket. We're going to get the new seal installed, and then I'll go ahead and get these filters installed. I'll bring you back and show you all that once it's complete, and I'll bring it back before we put the actual replacement pan in place. So with that being said, we'll bring you back in a short one moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our spin-on filter installed, tightened appropriately. We've got our main filter along with its Torx fastener in the rear, tightened, and of course we did get our seal replaced into our pump body. Now remember, on that pump body seal,
you're driving it in until that metal lip on that seal is flush with the pump body. So we verified that. Also, when that pump body seal went in, I did take a little bit of some of the dripping transmission fluid and just kind of wiped it down on the internal surface of the seal itself, so that way when this main seal went, and also put a little bit on the throat of where this main seal plugs into, this main filter plugs into that seal when it goes into the pump body. So basically, well, I guess what I'm saying is I lubricated that seal up as well as the neck on the filter, so that way it doesn't get installed dry and, you know, run the risk of damaging that seal. Now the manual doesn't say to do that. I like to do it where, if at all possible, again, just so it's not going into a dry surface and potentially causing damage. Anyway, rambling too much here. So filter's on, that's on. We got our gasket surface cleaned up, got our tray pushed out of the way. So now what we can do is just maneuver in here and start getting our pan put in. Now, yes, we haven't put the temperature sensor in the pan yet. We'll do that once we have the pan up on the transmission and tightened. Then we'll take that little Allen screw out of the side of the pan and thread in our temperature sensor and figure out, you know, which direction we're going to run our wiring to get up into our Banks 4-channel analog device, so that way we can then get the temperature to display on the iDash. But I'm talking too far ahead. Let me go get the new pan and the fasteners, and I'll start to get this thing up in here, and I'll bring you back in a bit. And again, you're not going to miss much. I'll bring you back once the pan's installed. It's literally just going to be me maneuvering the pan in the position and getting the fasteners started. And remember, you got a fiber gasket with this, so you have to fidget with it with a little bit to make sure the gasket stays lined up with the bolt holes, but it's not too bad. With that being said, let me get cracking on this and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got the pan installed. We got all the fasteners torqued down, so we're good there. And now what we're going to do is install the temperature sensor that we spoke about at the beginning of the video. And then once we get this installed, we'll figure out how we're going to run our wiring up to our 4-channel analog monitor. But you can see here, it's the part number 66559. This is the 1/8 MPT fluid temp sensor, or fluid temperature kit, as you can see there. Comes with a sensor and a little pigtail, and then we've got some extension cables that will plug into this pigtail and eventually make it up to one of the connectors on the 4-channel analog monitor. Now I am going to use thread sealant on here because these are MPT threads. And just to show you here, I had some ARP thread sealant, and it looks like the effective temperature range is -30 to, what is it, 550 degrees. Hopefully you can see that, with a hold pressure of 10,000 psi. So that will definitely cover the temperature range that this transmission and or this truck is definitely going to see, and that hold range is more than sufficient. So I'm gonna put a little dab of this on the threads, get that temperature sensor installed. Don't worry, I'm going to bring you around the driver's side, and that way we can kind of look at the pan and look at the temp sensor once it's in, and then we'll go from there. So one moment. And welcome back. So I got you at a little bit of an angle here. I apologize, but I just want to get you in here to see this, so you can see we got a nice new big beefy, like I said, very thick and very much heavier than the factory one in here, along with these nice cooling fins, which are going in the direction of airflow, so that'll help the heat, the additional mass of the pan itself, as well as these fins, will help get rid of some of that heat. Now I took the plug out just to show you here. It is just a little Allen plug that sits on the, looks like on this particular pan, at least the driver's side of the pan. That's where our temp sensor will go. And it looks like we can come over this way, and I'll show you when it's done, but we got an evap line we can attach to. We can come over the frame rail and just hit the factory wiring harness, which is on the outside of the frame rail here on the driver's side, and just follow it straight in the engine compartment into where we have our connectors for our 4-channel analog, just kind of sitting and waiting for us to plug into. But awesome. So you can, again, you can see the way that exhaust shoots straight over here, which is why, again, we had to go with this particular pan to accommodate for that. But either way, let me get the temp sensor installed and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our wire, our pigtail, plugged into our sensor. There's a sensor there installed. Now inside the pigtail, we ordered a couple of these 3-foot and 6-foot. These are the 3-wire sensor extension cables. Now, one thing to note on these extension cables, they come in a variety of different feet. I think I said, again, we picked up a couple 3-foot and a couple 6-foot. These are sold separately, so plan accordingly and try to estimate how many extensions you might need to get to a particular component. But it looks like for us, and I'll show you when we're done here, that it looks like one 6-foot cable, extension cable, is going to be able to reach from here to where we need it to go in the engine compartment. Now I'm going to take things a step further, and I'm going to grab a piece of this conduit cover that you see here. I know this has a particular name to it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but even though this Banks cable comes very nice with this nylon braiding on it, we're going to take it a step further and put an additional cover of protection on this. So with that being said, let me get some of that conduit measured out and cut, and we'll get this all wrapped up and zip tied, and I'll bring you back when it's done. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see, well, the word I was trying to think of earlier was loom. So we got some split loom. We cut a little piece to cover up a wiring that goes into our pigtail of our sensor. And if I get you underneath the exhaust here, you can see that we got a piece of loom also on our wiring as well. Our 6-foot wiring that's going to go up to our 4-channel analog. So that kind of buttons things up underneath here. So now we'll go top side and plug it into the 4-channel analog and get some transmission fluid in here. So one moment. And welcome back. So just to show you where that sensor ended up coming was between the wheel well, routed up into here, where if you remember from when we did the Banks install, we just had our 2 unused ports just kind of hanging out over here in this corner. So we're plugged in the channel C for the temp sensor for the transmission. And we can see what we have left here is just what will be channel D, and channel D will eventually be used for a temperature sensor that will be in the rear diff cover. Now, with that being said, I do have a Mag-Hytec rear diff cover. Now, nothing against it. It's a good diff cover. It'll get the job done. However, Banks, if you happen to watch this video at all, please consider making the diff covers for light-duty trucks such as the 1500s that you see here, and the other light duties and Fords and Toyotas and so on and so forth, because I've seen all the videos and the YouTube videos and the YouTube shorts showing the design improvements the bank cover has. Unfortunately, they're only available for the heavy-duty trucks like the 2500 that you see here, and not the 1500 that you see here. So what we have is a 9 1/4 ZF rear diff. Now, if it's something that they're just not going to have on the roadmap for a while, yeah, we've got the Mag-Hytec one. We could use that. It does have a port to thread a temperature sensor into, but I'd rather hold off, and maybe they'll see this and maybe they'll consider creating those diff covers for us individuals that have the light duty trucks. I know every time I ask on one of their videos, I see countless replies of individuals asking the same thing for their light duty trucks as well. So it seems like there is a pretty good market for it. That is, if Banks happens to see this video, or at least this section of the video. But anyway, with that said, we have our temperature sensor for our transmission plugged in. What I'm going to do now is to go ahead and just throw some transmission fluid in it. Now, according to the service manual, it says 5.5 to 5.6 quarts on a normal service, but you got to remember that the pan we put on is deeper and bigger, so that's going to account for an extra 1.5 quarts. Plus, the screw-on filter that we replaced is going to eat up some fluid.
plus the main filter that we replace is also going to eat up some fluid, as well as it replenishing anything that may have come out of the transmission cooler lines when we had that spin-off filter removed as well. So what we're going to have to do is fill it until we get a good spot in the dipstick, and then we can start it. And while it's cold, we'll check the level and keep filling until we get up to a running idle cold condition. And then once we're at cold on the dipstick, we'll stop, wait for it to heat up and get to operating temperature, and we'll check and make sure we're in the hot zone. Same thing with the engine oil. That should be pretty easy to work out. Again, we'll just start it for a few moments, let the transmission pull in some fluid, let the filter in the engine finish filling, sorry, words, and then we'll shut it down and we'll check fluids on everything and go from there. So again, rambling on too long, let me get some transmission fluid in it. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our transmission fluid filled to a decent spot on the dipstick. So I think at this point in time, we're okay to give it a start. Now, earlier, if you remember, we started to, at least as of now, pre-fill our oil filters. So I got you looking at the oil pressure gauge there. We're going to start it up, let it run for a few minutes, and then we'll power it down to do a final oil level check after everything's settled. But I figure I'd bring you along and let you see this, and let's see how fast it'll build oil pressure in this case. So here we go. There we go. So that was what, maybe two and a half seconds? Whoa, 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 whoa. Sorry, didn't mean to blow your eardrums out. So yeah, not too bad. And now as far as how fast that built oil pressure, that's pretty much on par with how fast it builds pressure on like a normal day, like if an oil change didn't happen. So that actually looks pretty good. So we'll let that idle down, we'll shut it off, and then we'll do a final oil level check, and then we'll take care of the transmission. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So if you remember, we let it idle down, we checked it, we topped our oil off. I'm just going to do one final check on the oil here just to show you for full disclosure. Let's get this cleaned off, and then we'll go in for another stick. Let's see, so here's our safe range. Hopefully you can see the end of my fingernail here. That's the top of the range, and we are right here. Pretty much kind of almost in line with the word, with the letter F in safe. Yeah, because the E is right there. So yeah, we're right about here, right where you see my fingernail. And the end of the range is there. So we're just a scooch over halfway into the safe zone, which is perfect. So we're going to stop right there. And then, yes, never mind the oil cap. Yes, the oil cap is still incorrect. It still says 5W20. If you remember, we've switched out to 0W40. Of course, I'm the only one doing the oil changes on this, so at least for now, it's not a biggie. I did try to find an oil cap that would fit that didn't have the weight of the oil on it, but to no avail. I'll see if I can maybe scratch that off later and at least just remove it. By the way, I'm rambling. So what I'm going to do next is work on getting the transmission filled up, but I've got to have the engine running at idle in order to do final checks on it, or at least cold checks, and then we'll have to obviously drive it and let it get hot. So I'm not going to film that section of it, because you'll literally be watching me as the engine's running, just checking, double checking, filling, checking again, yada yada yada. Not very interesting. So I'm going to pause you, take care of the transmission, then when I bring you back, we're going to get the 4-channel analog programmed to read a temperature sensor on channel C. We'll get that programmed in the iDash, and that'll take care of that piece. But I'll bring you back in one moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in here. We did get the transmission at least topped up. We're showing good, running at idle. We're within our cold mark on the dipstick, is where we should be. Now, truth be told, we still need to run it, get it up to operating temperature, and also check it when it's hot to make sure that we're within the marks as well. But what I told you I'd do, I promised you I'd do, is once we get the banks to wake back up here, we're gonna see if we can muddle our way through getting channel C taken care of. So we exit out of our gauge that you just saw me do, and if we go into Banks modules, and we went to 4-channel analog module, because remember we also have the pedal monster on here as well. Take channel C over again, and then we're going to say that we want to there you go. I had to go down and select it. That's why it was giving me a fit. We want to enable channel C. Now this isn't going to be pressure, it's going to be temperature. And sensor, looks like it is already set to, well, that's 3/8 NPT. That's not what we want. We want fluid temp 1/8 NPT. So that matches the sensor that we got. So awesome. So you could see right there at the top, it says 79 degrees in gray. Let me back up. And now that we've got it configured, let's go into gauge layout. No, I don't want that one. I want gauge selection. And this is the gauge you saw me on that's got the pedal monster on it. So you could see our 2 channels which currently measure fuel pressure and boost pressure, but we're going to take field 3, which is currently set to RPM, and we're going to change that. And what we want to do, I believe it's under group. Nope, not under group, sorry, category. And then if we come all the way down, what I'm looking for is, and I'm sorry, I got you in the wrong, I'm in the wrong spot again. Okay, so let me go back and just kind of hopefully unconfuse you. And I apologize, I'm muddling through this. It's been a while since I did settings, but it's in group. Come down to 4-channel module, and we want to display channel C in that field 3 there. So now if we back up, and you can see channel C says 79 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we look at our dash, hopefully you can see that the dash says about 81. So it's pretty close, and that's about what we would expect. We would expect to see ambient temperature because that transmission hasn't even got warm at all. Sorry, hopefully that comes back into focus. So awesome. That tells us our sensor is good. It tells us we are definitely talking to the 4-channel analog, which then obviously comes back in and relays that information into the iDash. So awesome. So let me just shut the key off so it's not on indefinitely. Now I do apologize because it's a bit of a long video, but what we did accomplish today was doing another service on it. So this is a second 270-mile service. And what we have on this motor is about 542 miles since it was rebuilt. We took oil samples of both the oil and the supercharger. We'll get those sent off to the lab, and what we want to do is compare them to the first set of samples we sent in. Now, with that being said, there is a caveat to this. I'm sending oil in. Remember, we switched from 5W20 break-in oil to 0W40 AMS oil signature. Now, we will let the lab know this, but remember, the day we did the switch, we just drained out whatever 520 we could get and refilled it with 0W40. So that initial run that we put on there, that additional 270, is going to have a little bit of that 5W20 break-in oil mixed in with that 0W40, because what we didn't do was a flush, and a flush would have meant draining the oil, filling it with 0W40, running it for a little bit, and then draining it again and changing filters again and doing one final change out to 0W40. So we'll make the lab aware that this sample is potentially going to have a slight intermix of 5W20, and the reason why, that break-in oil, the reason why that is important is because when you go to mixing oils, and especially oils that have different additive packages, the way those additive packages mix together could actually alter the chemistry of the oil. So it could throw our test results for a little bit of a loop as far as what it sees in the additive packages and how much life is left. But remember, what we're more concerned with seeing right now is making sure that our wear metals are on the downward slope and not staying the same, or, you know, heaven forbid, increasing. Anyway, with that said, oil change done. We got our samples. We went ahead and did our transmission pan and put the more beefier pan in there, which will help with our cooling. We got our temperature sensor installed into our transmission pan and configured for the iDash. And while we were in that transmission, we went ahead and changed out both the spin-on filter and the main filter. Granted, we didn't have to do that. We could have left the filters that were on it, because when we did the service the first time, we put the four-wheel drive filter on there and the four-wheel drive pan. We could have left those filters on there because it had a very, very light use, but it was one of those things. We had the filters, we were in there, might as well go ahead and change it out while we're done. I've checked it, haven't seen any leaks on it, so I think we're good to go. Once again, a lot of rambling. I do apologize. But with that being said, that will wrap up this video. And if you have subscribed already, I thank you immensely. If not, please consider doing so. The way YouTube works is the more views we can get, the more it helps the channel, and it helps us kind of bring a lot more of this content and modifications and general maintenance videos to you. So with that being said, once again, I want to apologize for the lull in content. Just had a lot of stuff going on right now and haven't been able to get back to our projects, but hopefully this will get us a good start in the right direction. With that being said, I'll talk to you later. Bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.